When we are in grief, we are in an empowered state because we are releasing what no longer serves us. Our environment, our experience, our community, whatever it is, and we are awakening to something new that's already begun inside us. This happens when we are willing to let go and willing to accept death and grief as a natural process. Hi, it's Margaret Maloney, and welcome to Season 3 of the Death Dhamma Podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so appreciative that you are part of my community. And yet, I seek not to be attached to the idea of the podcast or even to the idea of our community. And that's our topic this season: attachment, clinging, and aversion. What happens when we really want something? What happens when we really don't want something? And what does it do to our suffering and dissatisfaction? Let's dive in and find out a little bit more with today's episode. Grief as an empowered state. When I have been in deep grief, I don't remember feeling strong. I do remember feeling weak and disoriented. But now, after speaking with Tracee Dunblazer, I have a new understanding, a realization that when something changes and we move with those changes, we are empowered because we are choosing a new way forward, even if it's letting go of a childhood trauma or creating a new lifestyle or grieving the loss of someone you loved. You can own this and create something new. In fact, you want to own this and actively create your new way of moving through this world. And in this way, we can recognize and be with the ancient ritual of grief. Everyone, welcome to another episode of the Death Dhamma Podcast. And I am happy today to be sitting here with Tracee Dunblazer. And Tracee has done some work with grief. She's written about grief, and she's written a book,
Conquering Your Karmic Relationships.
And so you can see why she is the right person to share with us today the experiences she's seen with us, with attachment and aversion and grief and death, and see how it all comes together. Tracee, thank you for being here.
Really good to be here. I'm always excited to talk about my favorite topic, death and grief.
Oh, thank you.
The new book that I have is Transformative Grief, an Ancient Ritual for Modern Times. And the goal was to help people recognize grief as a daily process. It's something that we experience for all reasons, not just death, not just loss, but for every transition that we experience. And the more we understand that the necessity of the spiritual process, it's the spiritual aspects of ourself awakening in our mental, emotional, and physical world. As we recognize that there's a process to that awakening, we no longer have to see it as something that's negative or something that's bad or something that we've done wrong or something that shouldn't be that way. A lot of times people have a relationship with death that it shouldn't be that way. Oh, they were too young, or oh, they had a great life, or whatever we attach to that. So that was the purpose of Transformative Grief, was to help people understand that grief is the spiritual process that we go through to become exactly who we are.
That's beautiful. You know, when somebody says that this is their favorite topic or one of their favorite topics, then I know that this is the right person to be here on the podcast because, so we are all about talking about death and grief in a helpful, positive way. And so, sometimes we even laugh and things like that happen. And Absolutely. So that's beautiful. Now, when you're talking about ancient transformative rituals, and then you're talking about today's world, I'm guessing that you can kind of help me link those two things together.
Absolutely. Well, grief is the ancient ritual.
Ah.
And what we have done is over time and in different cultures, we have sought to depress, repress, oppress that experience. We have called it names. We've attached certain belief systems to it that refer to us as in a weakened state, when in fact, when we are in grief, we are in an empowered state because we are releasing what no longer serves us, our environment, our experience, our community, And we are awakening to something new that's already begun inside us. This is our way of becoming conscious of this new skill set or this new perspective or this new creative idea that we can manifest, is our transition to awaken that and then to manifest it.
So why do you think we've developed this aversion over the years? Because we have. I mean, I noticed it. I went through a process with losing my family, and so I began to understand grief more intimately, and also to begin to understand culturally more of the flavors of the attitudes around me. And yeah, there's definitely in our culture, there's a lot of pushing away, aversion towards that. And and I think you're mentioning that has happened through the ages. Why do you think that has happened?
Well, I think it's, I am certain it has changed quite a bit as we learn to communicate much more immediately.
Okay.
We don't have to witness death. When people think of death, they think of when they see it on TV and somebody gets a diagnosis and then we're at the funeral. Right. Yeah. So we literally cut out that entire process of the human being that is making a transition and they're awakening to the other side. It's a process of awakening to the spiritual worlds that are becoming dominant or predominant to their awareness. And that's a beautiful thing to witness. We, however, people tend to focus on, and this is what grief is about. When people talk about everybody grieves in their own way, well, what that really means is we make grief about us. We make their death about us.
Yes, I do notice that. Totally notice that. Yes.
So our grief is the way in which we awaken ourselves to witness the transition they're going through. Our grief for someone who has died is about our transition in acknowledging them in a new spiritual way.
Yes, I see that. And as you're speaking, of course, I'm thinking about it, and comparing, and I'm thinking, yeah, absolutely. So much of it was, recreating my life, right? For any of us, I'll say me because I'm thinking my personal experience, because we make it about us, like you said. And the, realization that these people were going to be in my life differently. But it is definitely that grieving of that. I can't just go down the hall and talk to you. I can't just pick up the phone at the end of the day and have a conversation with you.
Right.
And so do you think as a society, we've rejected that there's that change at the end, or are we just jumping to it, or?
Well, every culture is different. Here in America, it has only been the last, say, 20 or 30 years that we've had this deep uprooting of our relationship to the religions that are easily accessible to us.
Okay.
The generations that are coming in, the millennials and then after or before, I don't know which I mean, the younger from the millennials here, they're not interested in religion. They're not interested in churches. They're not interested in spirituality in the way it has in the patriarchal society that's been set up for us. That's what's changing, is that we are opening up to a whole other relationship with the spirituality within us and the acknowledgement of our own spiritual power, right? And so the more we can recognize the death and rebirth cycle in every other way in our life, it makes it much easier for us to recognize actual physical death, spiritual rebirth, and then, reincarnation. It requires us to open our mind a little differently, open up to new philosophies, or to understand. So one of the things, like in my Conquer Your Karmic Relationships, Heal Spiritual Trauma to Open Your Heart and Restore Your Soul is
okay. Thank you.
And even if you don't believe in past lives, one really must recognize that each person comes in with certain spiritual imprints that give them an opinion or an expression or a view of the world.
Okay.
And so whether or not you call those past lives, past life experience,
Mm-hmm.
or spiritual imprints, it's still something that you are bringing with you to use in order to view the world as it is and then make any changes you deem necessary, which is your karmic relationships.
I see.
Right.
I see. Now, I definitely, being a practicing Buddhist, I come from a background of accepting the idea of past lives. But like you said, not everyone does. But as you're saying it, I'm thinking, if we can accept the fact that when someone is born, part of who they are comes from their DNA, right?
Right.
That our genetic makeup, which was created and we came into the world with it, then I feel like it's just another step to accept that there's something else that came with us. But I guess it's that step that is maybe a bigger leap to take, huh?
Exactly. And we don't have here in America, most of the religions that people follow don't address that.
True.
Right. So we are having to, that's where, people in my field are beginning to really fill that gap.
Okay.
In order to hear what I have to say, you don't have to have any religion,
Mm-hmm.
or you can have every religion,
Mm-hmm.
because I have something for you. I want you to follow whatever your belief system, but I want you to expand it to understand some of these spiritual truths that exist regardless of what you believe.
And why don't we talk more about that? Because when I introduced you, I spoke about you and I spoke about your books, but I didn't specifically say a little bit more. So would you like to say a little bit more when you're saying like people like me and what you do? Maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Tell them a little bit about me. And
Yes.
I'm a spiritualist.
Okay.
I call myself a spiritual empath. I do shamanic work.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that means that I seek to meet the client where they're at.
Okay.
I'm a certified grief counselor. I do a lot of relationship counseling because I find all experience in life is about your relationship with whatever it is. But I've been doing this for 30 years. I was born multi-spirited.
Okay.
I was born with multiple spirits attached to me and had a very clear relationship with them, but no way to express it outside of myself because we called that crazy.
I'm sorry. I was wondering, and I wonder if she was born into a family that was open to this, or if that's been part of your journey is opening up the people around you.
Absolutely. Mental illness has been something that has been a part of my ancestry, but so I think that there was a healthy fear. Well, I hate that word healthy, A, and
Mm-hmm.
B, I don't think it's necessarily a healthy fear, but I think that everybody, and I come from a very long line of strong, stoic women.
Okay. Got that.
I don't know why you'd feel that. That's dumb to feel that. You keep moving.
Just keep going.
You just keep going.
Just keep going. You'll deal with it later.
Exactly. And then nobody ever deals with it. So I was definitely in, my family over the years at different times have made, quips about who are you and how did you end up in this family? Because I'm an empath. And so I was the person to experience and express the depth of the emotionalism and the realities of the pain that had existed from our ancestry and then on into our, into my life and future experiences. And part of that was dealing with all of the spirits that lived with me as well, dealt with, specifically speaking, slavery, sex trafficking,
Mm-hmm.
different cultural genocide, so different people in different times and spaces where these things were occurring, where culturally we haven't learned how to deal with those either.
No, it's true. It's true. Look at us trying to deny it.
Exactly. Right.
Yes.
People are fighting to the end.
Right.
Every year I do a haunted blog.
Oh, I love that.
It's so much fun. So I pick a place to go and I just go and I wherever I'm led. And at the beginning, I thought of it as going to like a haunted hotel or a haunted place, but Spirit has taken me. I went to Gettysburg, and of course, you know that there's not just one place in Gettysburg that is haunted.
That's a lot,
right?
Yes.
And, what was powerful for me is the story that wanted to be told was the fact that Pennsylvania is the only state in the union that still does not acknowledge any indigenous tribes.
I did not know.
Federally speaking, they don't, and so there's been a lawsuit that an organization there's been multiple lawsuits against the trying to bring it into acknowledgement. There are multiple tribes there, but they're just not federally acknowledged. Maybe because the feds don't want to pay, whatever that is. It's a much deeper, fundamental relationship that we have with racism and the illusions that exist about I want to say survival.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but so that was one of the things that came to light in my story was why are we still here? This is the haunting. This is the haunting. Right?
The haunting, you mean the haunting being what we're really still carrying with us? Is that what you mean?
Yes, which is this cultural trauma of still trying to deny the presence of people who have been here on this continent longer than we have.
Right.
So that's the haunting, and we're still suffering. How do we bring grief into that? That's very I call it transpersonal grief, because whether or not you or your ancestry has experienced it, I believe there are a lot of people on the planet who, regardless of what color or ethnicity you come into a body today, your spirit has been here multiple times and has brought with you knowledge from other times and other experiences to help you navigate how you want to address those things today.
Okay. So let's look at some of this. There's so much important information there and things to think about. Okay. So I'm thinking it as so one of the first things I need to be able to do in order to work at this level is to acknowledge that this is a possibility, that I have had this and that I carry with me these experiences from these past lives. And so that's a form of, we could call it both clinging and aversion, like aversion towards recognizing that, but also clinging to that's not true. And then let's say I'm accepting to that, then I need to find a way possibly to acknowledge that means possibly in a past life, I was part of this, not recognizing the indigenous people, or I was one of them, or I've been both. And then I think that also leads me to, so like today in the body that I occupy now, when we're looking at making things right, or even just acknowledging, or even just teaching the history of what has happened, it means I need to not push it away because it's unpleasant. So that's another form of aversion.
Right.
And I feel like I also need to not cling to but that wasn't me. I wasn't the one that did it. Why should I feel guilty?
Right. So you brought up clinging and aversion, and I want to address those from not from my perspective. We have the same perspective, but from my languaging.
Yes.
Because when we are clinging to something, it's because we don't yet have the information we need. When we have an attachment there, that clinging is purposeful.
Okay.
It's meant to give us information. We stay attached long enough. Like we might be using aversion, right? Get away from me. No, I don't want to talk to you, right? We may be having a conversation with somebody energetically to push them away from us, but what we're doing is we're attaching ourselves to them in order to get to a point of peace where we can access whatever energy, information, or balance we are seeking, right? So the other thing is the aversion. I call it resistance.
Yes, absolutely.
And when we resist something, that is the point at which the moment before breakthrough.
Okay.
The more deeply we resist, the more cognizant of the situation we have become. That's why we're in resistance to it. We know it's there, we feel it, we can see it, and we're resisting because we are acclimating to the new information or new vibration that it's bringing to us. Just about the point that we have a breakthrough. Again, the purpose is to find a balance, to level up, open up.
Okay. And so now I want to bring this back to, you're talking about helping individuals and helping with their relationship with the karma that they've brought with them. I don't know that you said it exactly like that, but, and then also helping people in, interpersonal relationships. And I'm guessing that there are some themes that you see, so that I might come to you, and I of course, I'm going to think my situation is unique because I'm me. Mm-hmm. But that and it might be like a different thing, right? But that, and at its core, I am thinking that you find some common things that cause us to not want to let go of something, or, that hold us back in our life or in our relationships. And I was curious if you would like to share some of those common themes that, the outward symptom is maybe my partner and I argue over money, but you dig and you find these themes.
Well, in the Conquer Your Karmic Relationships book, I deal with the first main relationship that people have is to your relationship to food and money.
Okay, so I totally get that. I totally get that.
Right? Mm-hmm. We are taught certain patterns from childhood about our relationship to money.
Yes,
and that's based on the karma of the family, the ancestry of how much they had and how mm-hmm. how easily accessible food was. And then those ideas are put on the children, and they learn from their own experiences. And then you come, like for me personally, my relationship with food was based in the memory of having starved and then become ill and died. So a relationship to food where there wasn't enough.
Right.
And in fact, it took my life. So now I was laughing with a friend of mine. I'm at the end portion of this relationship to food that I've had my entire life. Uh-huh. We were talking about filling the refrigerator. And she is a person that her husband just needs to fill the refrigerator, as do I.
Okay.
He only feels comfortable when the refrigerator is full, because what if ...
Yes, exactly.
Right? What if there's an earthquake? What if we can't get to the store? What if the store closes? Like whatever.
Right.
And it makes her uncomfortable to have a full refrigerator. She likes to see a nice, sparse, clean refrigerator with just enough food for a few days, because she doesn't want to waste. Right. And so these are all things that we have to recognize in ourselves, and by resisting them makes us see them, right? Mm-hmm. Clinging to them gives us the opportunity to change that boundary with ourselves.
Okay.
Right.
And so I would think then, if you were, I know this is a friendship, but if you sat down with her and her husband to talk to them about this, I guess, then he has something where he came from with the food thing also. Right. And I wonder, could they have come from the same? So, and I'll share you why this, because this really resonates with me, because my parents definitely, in a way, kind of hoarded food.
Yeah.
When they passed, I remember one of the first things I said when my mom was the last one to go, I remember saying to one of her friends, please get all the food and get it donated as soon as possible so it doesn't spoil. Right. Yes. Because I just knew. And like, if my mom liked, I remember there was this juice she liked. It was a mango juice that she bought at Costco. I remember it so specifically. And she knew the codes at Costco. So she knew when something wasn't going to be carried anymore. So then she'd have she'd have lines of those mango things. And other than that, she wasn't, I'll say, what we would call a hoarder in life. Her house was neat and tidy, but the food thing. And so now I come from being raised that way. Mm-hmm. And some days I look at my refrigerator and I think, oh my God, you have no food in your refrigerator. So I see that.
Absolutely.
And so have I become am I rebelling against, and I know my mom grew up very poor.
Right.
Almost stone soup kind of poor. So I get that. And then I guess I'm a rebelling against that. I don't know.
Well, I don't know that I would have to know more to know whether
you'd have to know more to say.
Rebelling.
Yes.
But you are seeking to bring it into balance.
Right.
Which is the most important thing. The idea here, for my friend and her husband, he has to remind himself that the way, the city, the culture that we live in, it is highly 99.99% most likely that he will ever run out of food.
Right. He's probably always going to be okay.
Always going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got to begin to remind himself of that.
Okay.
And, instead of, shopping for the month, how about shopping for 3 weeks and then 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
And then what, like, where is their common denominator that they can agree upon? She needs to consider that, it's smart to have a week's worth of food in case something does happen. We all learned in the pandemic with toilet paper. Right? So now we all keep at least 2 weeks of toilet paper in whatever storage space you have.
Right.
That's what we do now. We've learned that.
Mm-hmm.
So that balanced out a society where that was unbalanced
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. So that's what you're seeking in your partnership in this regarding this issue is how can you bring balance where both people feel like they are thriving in their circumstance. Yes. Right? And the most important thing is to talk about it, to be heard about what you need, and to be able to be free to explore, not judged, right? But to explore why you feel the way that you do. Because sometimes just talking about it releases you from that attachment, and it allows you to gain more information, to make a different decision, or to practice. That anytime we change a habit, we grieve a portion of that. So in this case, he may need to grieve how he grew up.
Okay.
He may need to grieve the fact that that there was never enough food, that he was, the third child, and he never got to eat because everybody had already eaten, and there was barely enough for him. Like, whatever his circumstances are, we all have them, and you have to grieve that happened. Give yourself permission to release that emotion and that attachment to the fact that happened. Recognize that you were in a position of power today. Mm-hmm. He's working. He does all the shopping. He is the one in power.
Okay. So he's owning this food process. It's all good.
Exactly. And so now he can relax.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean to him? If he's, like I said, stocking up for a month, what's a compromise for him? Mm-hmm. What does he really need for, say, 7 days? Right? Stock up on those things, and maybe consider that he's always free to go to the store at any time he needs to. Right. So practice, right? It comes with practice. You change that behavior, and then you talk yourself through it every time your desire is to follow that original pattern. Mm-hmm. Right? And that comes with grief, because every time you resist going immediately into that original pattern, you're going to remember all the reasons it exists today.
There you go.
That could be the karma, which is your spiritual imprints. Maybe you lived in 60 billion years ago, and where we didn't even believe that our science hasn't caught up with our Earth reality just yet. Right. We're getting closer and closer, but you lived in some ancient civilization where this pattern began. And so you might have some memories of that. Right. Or call that up into your spirit, and you're grieving that in addition to as juxtaposed to what you are doing today and the relationship that you have today.
And I'm struck with, as you're talking and you're saying, and I'm struck with, again, there's that we come full cycle with grief and the need to be open to grief in our life. That grief isn't just like the big things, right. And in the past, we've talked about on the podcast about death with the big D, like somebody dies, but then also the small d, the little things that we say goodbye to, the impermanence that brings us every day, right. And how facing those little deaths prepare us for the big one.
Exactly.
I just, I'm struck with that, like you were bringing grief full cycle and acknowledging that it's part of our life every day. And I wonder, because I do think that still in our society, you and I both living not actually geographically that far apart from one another. I wonder, do we need to start using another word to bring people along, or should we keep calling it grief and just help people understand that grief is not like a big social stigma?
Well, I that's a great question. I I would vote for changing our relationship to the word grief. You know, like when I was getting my certification to be a grief counselor, there was a book a long time ago called Good Grief.
Yes, I know the book. Yes.
And we would, oh, good grief. Oh, you kids. Oh, good grief.
Yes.
Like that was something that the elders in the family would say over and over again. And I think that over the years we have sought to change our relationship to the word, but we don't change our relationship to the thing.
Okay.
You know, it's basically emotions and our willingness to experience them and allowing our emotion, you know, emotions exist to help us communicate with our creator, whether it's your higher self, however you deem that to be present for you. Grief is the way that the creator comes down and puts this energy and emotion moving through you. And the more you are able to intricately identify an emotion is the way you begin to understand how your creator speaks to you. Sometimes it's emotionally, sometimes it's psychically, sometimes it's telepathically, sometimes it's viscerally in our physical world. But all of those things are grief.
Yes.
Grief is just the experience of becoming cognizant of the very intricate and unique vibrations of emotion that exist. And there are hundreds of them.
Wow.
And most people in their mind know about 5. That's a Tracee fun fact. I am making stuff up, but
no, I like that. I like that fun fact. So, you know, I'm going to ask you, and what are the 5 that you feel like we know about?
Sad, mad, frustrated, confused, happy.
Okay.
Am I missing one?
No, yeah, I was doing my fingers. You go. Not because I was testing you, just because like I didn't want to cut you off.
No, it's good.
Okay. Yeah, but it's so much more complex, isn't it?
It really is. You know, it's like the idea of feeling indecisive, right? When we are indecisive, we're actually neutral and in a seeking position. We are in a position to look more deeply and understand more precisely what the situation is, and then eventually relate to what we feel about it. Right? It's our feelings as we begin to acknowledge them a little differently. You know, when you're mad about something is different than when you're raging about something, or when you're angry about something, or you're frustrated. They're all vibrations that are expressing a similar dynamic, but they're all very unique to what they are. And when we practice, practice describing these feelings, we learn so much more about ourselves. And it opens up literally a new world for us to examine in a freer way, or a less depressed way, or with less anxiety. Like, our mental health depends upon our ability to intimately describe the differences in these emotions for ourselves, not for anybody else.
Right.
And even if you were to say, gosh, I feel something and I don't know what I feel. Self, what do I feel? Your self is going to bring to you images, words, signs from your environment to give you indications of how you can describe that emotion. Your spirit is going to, when you ask the question, your spirit is going to find the answer for you in a way you can receive it.
Yes. And do you help people become more open to listening to that voice? Because I definitely think that is something also that's not necessarily encouraged in today's world. And I think there's some gender bias there. Like, I was having a discussion with someone the other day, and I made a comment about intuition, and I was talking to a man, so he said something about, well, that's women's intuition. And I looked at him and I said, but you have it too. You were just maybe culturally taught that you don't. And he's like, no, women's intuition is a different thing. And then I'm like, I'm done, because like, that's what I wasn't there that day for that, but I was like, okay, I tested the boundaries of the belief and I moved on, because that wasn't the purpose of the discussion.
Exactly. No, and that's a smart decision. Yeah, you have to know the boundaries of the person that you're dealing with, and how far you can go. In Transformative Grief, actually in every single book I've written, at the end of each chapter is a ritual of some sort that people can use to deepen their relationship to the dynamic that's been discussed.
Oh, I love that. And do you mind sharing an example of a ritual?
Yeah, I'll pull the grief book and I'll do ritual 1. The first chapter is called Grief, the Eternal Well, Understanding the Nature of Grief. So it basically breaks down how our society looks at grief and the way we can relate to it. And at the end of the chapter, it is the value of ritual and altar building. Altar building is a way that you clear a space. You literally clear a physical space, but while you're cleaning and clearing your physical space, that is your commitment to clearing a mental and emotional space in order to receive what will come as you set your intention for the altar. The first ritual is for illumination and cleansing. And there's an affirmation that you can write out for yourself. I am safe to know the truth. I walk toward it with an open heart.
I am safe to know the truth. I walk toward it with an open heart. Oh my gosh. Just walking around saying that. How helpful.
Right.
Just
a
great mantra.
People don't realize that fear is what belies every resistance that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, fear is fluid. It is not stagnant. So fear moves us through, therefore we move through it, right? But fear moves us through something. It makes us pay attention more deeply to what it is. We get to know it, then we move through the fear. Then the more we know, the less we fear. So being safe, you're safe to know the truth. It's okay. Yes. Whatever the truth is that you were asking for, you're going to handle it. And you're going to have all the support you need to do it. Right. So it's the idea of setting your intention. And the idea is that it should take a week, a couple of weeks, as long as you want it to take. But the idea is that you journal every day thoughts and ideas that came to you, feelings that you had, epiphanies that you had, right? Writing that down. And then after you're burning, you rereading them. It is so amazing how much more information you gleaned and didn't remember, but even though you'd written it.
Yes. It's that I feel, and you can help me with this, I know, it's that I've freed something up. I've released something and I've freed it up, and I'm going to go about my business, for lack of a better word, but it's freed. But now things are going to come back to me. I'm going to have these experiences because I've gone through this process, this ritual of freeing something up. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the more information one of the things that always, we call it complicated grief. Usually we experience complicated grief around somebody's death when somebody you love dies, and then all of a sudden you find out they had a second family, or, they had something that you didn't know. And so you have to not only grieve that this person didn't share that with you, you didn't know that of them, you maybe don't feel like you knew them at all because you're finding out this new information. Then you've got to grieve the fact that the relationship you did have with them is gone too, right? So the one thing, the relationship you had wasn't real and it's gone, right? So it's complicated. Accessing the truth, oftentimes we need to access the truth about ourselves, about how we see ourselves, how we see others. Mm-hmm. Looking at your own personal biases. That's another ritual that you can do in the book, is looking at your own personal biases and what are they? We are indoctrinated in a culture that has created systemic racism. So nobody in our society today is getting out of not having some sort of mental, emotional, personal, spiritual bias.
Absolutely.
People, just not going to happen.
Right.
No need to be ashamed of it. No need to feel guilty about it. Mm-hmm. Every need to open up to the truth about it, access why that might be for you, and learn to change the things that you need to change in yourself in order for you to feel safe.
And there you go. It comes back to the clinging and the aversion and something that we've brought through with us, and it is part of who we are. Because I agree with you, we do have systemic racism, and people want to say we're not a racist country. Yes, we are, and it's here. It's here, and you're right. And it safely access the truth. Understand that means within us we each have some form of bias, and it doesn't make me a bad person. It just makes me a person. And then if I can be ready to face that, then maybe I can be free.
Right. Half the biases we carry aren't true. They're just not true. Yeah. Maybe at some point they were true for us. Maybe we had an experience, whatever it was. One of the things that we're seeing in our political world today is, people are supporting politicians who have lied to them. Right. Yes. And they are averse to accepting that truth because they are deeply fearful of what they deem the consequences if they accept what's happening.
It's like a difficult relationship. It is. It is a relationship, and it is a difficult one. But it's like if you see your friend and your friend doesn't want to acknowledge that someone might be in any way abusive, because then that's a reflection either maybe of the choice that was made or the path that needs to be taken next.
Exactly. And here's the thing, and that's what these rituals are for, is to get you to a place of just acceptance of what is. It is inevitable once you see what the truth is and you live with it for a while and you more deeply understand how you got there, there's going to be a natural, effortless course of action that's going to lead you from that place.
Okay.
That you can't get while you're still penduluming back from attachment to aversion.
Okay. And so as we talk about that, and you have been so generous and shared so much, I have to not cling to you. So eventually I have to let you go back to your day. Is there something you would like to share with us that we didn't get to, that maybe there's something I didn't ask you, or there's a piece of, wisdom that you would like to pass on? I really want to check in with you to make sure that we really get to cover some things that are going to be important and helpful.
If and this is something that I do for myself, if I had it my way, if everybody hearing this podcast could just take one moment and look at one thing that you have judged in the last 24 hours, one thing you judged, and just go towards it and ask yourself to do research on it, Google it, get more information. Look at what your bias may be about. Look at what your judgment is telling you about yourself. Our judgment is telling us about ourselves, not others. Just do a little more research. Open up a little wider and know you're safe in that information. It's okay. We are all in this together, and we are all moving. And there is an eventual outcome that is positive for all of us, and it is going to include balance. It is going to include self-acceptance, and it is going to include acceptance of others. So this divisiveness that we're living, it's just not real. It's just not. And so people have to look a little more deeply to get to what is the next thing for them. And eventually all of us are going to kind of sync up.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Tracee. So everyone, to me as well, looking at something that you're judging, something you've encountered in the last 24 hours that has led you to have some judgment, and then acknowledge it and do some research of that judgment and be with it and walk towards the truth of it.
And even if it's, you don't see it as judgment, something that has made you uncomfortable, because discomfort is the first line of acknowledgement where we are judging something. Judging means we're cognizant of it. Discomfort means we don't. It is unconscious. Walk towards it, not away from it.
Okay. And by the way, everyone, she means that metaphorically for the most part. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been invaluable.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your own stories about attachment. So follow this link, I'm going to read it to you in a minute here, to leave me a 90-second message with your ideas and suggestions. You can go to https://www.speakpipe.com .com/death_Dhamma_podcast. I suppose you could also just use your favorite search engine to say SpeakPipe Death Dhamma Podcast. And there you can record an audio message for me. And be sure to come over to margaretmaloney.com. That's MargaretMeloni.com and join the community. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma Podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.